think sometimes the people can get behind the general idea of like, yes, I want to be respectful. Yes, I want to uphold your dignity. But when you're in the moment and you're having all of these big feelings and you're probably feeling afraid and you're probably feeling anxious, or maybe you're just really excited and ready for it to end, or maybe you're devastated, but it has to, it can be hard to remember how, like, you may remember the ideal. It can be hard to apply that to real life. So what are some practical examples besides not ghosting that you've seen that someone should not do?
Yeah, so we have a couple of articles actually on the Catholic Match blog. One of them I think is titled How to Break Up as a Catholic. So I'd really recommend that, and I'll probably send you the link after this. Maybe you can link it in the show notes. But it's really just like a step-by-step guide of how to break up as a Catholic. And before I dive into that, I'm going to say I'm speaking very generally here. Every relationship is different and unique and has often very different struggles. But generally speaking, there's a couple of things you should do when you are breaking up with someone. And I think the first step is when you actually do decide to break up with them or have a conversation about breaking up, I think you need to do that at a time that you're not super hot-headed and you don't have a lot of these raging emotions. You are going to have emotions about it. Emotions are part of being human. And I'm not telling you that it's wrong to have these emotions. But what I am saying is if you need to have a very difficult, serious conversation with your significant other or your soon-to-be ex, you should let some of those feelings cool off. Go for a walk, put the phone down, go pray if you can, and get in a proper mind space before you actually have this conversation and break up with someone. I realize that's easier said than done. When you're really angry or you're really hurt or you're really sad, you probably want to get right to the point and flesh it out and end things right then and there. But I really encourage you to step away, cool down, pray, and then come back to the conversation when you're in a better mindset. This will help you avoid saying really stupid things that you might regret saying, later on down the road. And it will also help you to treat that person with respect, treat yourself with respect, and hopefully leave the relationship on a better note.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's super helpful advice. It's just good advice in general. Like, it's not a good idea to talk when you're about anything really, especially unpleasant things when you're really, really emotional. It's also the sort of thing that'll come in handy when you're parenting. So it's good practice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think, obviously I'm generally speaking here and I make these same mistakes over and over again, but generally speaking, I think it's best to avoid making a really big life-changing decision when you're like in the heat of the moment and you have these raging emotions, because that's when you can easily make a mistake or say something you'll regret.
So do you have any thoughts for if a person goes into a conversation, like a breakup conversation, without those like ragey feelings, but then they develop them in the middle of it? Do you have any thoughts? I mean, obviously in a normal conversation, you'd be like, let's pause and refresh. Is that possible in a breakup? Is that advisable in a breakup? What do you think?
I'm generally speaking here, and it really probably will depend on each person, but I think there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, let me hit pause, let me take a breather. And of course, if you're talking on the phone versus being in person, those are two very different things too. But I think there's nothing wrong with hitting pause and saying, hey, like we both have a lot of stuff going on here. This is an ongoing conversation. And I think it would be best if we just hit pause for a few minutes or even a day, sleep on it, come back to it. It's important to learn how you react to certain things, whether you're going to stay with this person or not. I kind of hate the word trigger, but it is helpful to know like what your triggers are and how you react to certain things that really bother you. And it's super important for you to learn to control your emotions and learn, what your triggers are and how to calm yourself down so you don't end up in the heat of the moment in a terrible argument that could have been easily avoided.
That's just good advice for right now, you guys. Maybe take a second and go to adoration or something and like think through the things that have triggered you. I mean, so to define that, it's like if something happens in the moment and you have a really strong emotional reaction that's not consistent with what happened in the moment, you've probably been triggered, right? Sure. You've probably been, something in the past has been stirred up. And typically it happens enough times that you can recognize what those are for you. So maybe even like make a list of them right now, even if you're not thinking about breaking up, like it's just good to know. And then also just practice that kind of skill, of like pushing pause in a conversation and like saying, okay, I need to figure out how to calm myself down, because even if you don't end up breaking up with the person you're dating, that's still a really good skill to have. Like you'll still need it eventually
it will
in your
serve
life.
you well. And all of your relationships, whether they're romantic or not. It will serve you in the workplace. It will serve you with your future children one day. So I think all of that's super important. The one other note I want to make on that, and I was just reading an article about this the other day, and I was like, wow, this is like so simple yet so true. This really stands out to me. It was whether you're breaking up or not, I think any conversation, it's important to come into it, when you're actually somewhat in a good mindset. And by that, I mean, you're well rested. You're not having this conversation at 3:00 in the morning. You're not starving. You aren't eating this. You're not talking about this, 2 minutes before you're about to have dinner and you're so hungry and you're not thinking straight. You're not maybe doing this in a public setting where things can be really awkward, or in front of family or friends. A breakup or just any intense conversation that you're going to have in this relationship, it's so important to respect that person by preparing yourself mentally and physically for it. And then also having the respect to do it in a setting where you can both be comfortable and you can both be honest with each other, instead of, like at Starbucks or in the backseat of a car or, wherever. So often I hear these like horror stories of like someone who, broke up with someone like at their family's dining room table, and like I can't imagine how uncomfortable that must have been. So have respect for the other person by doing it in a setting that makes sense, and also making sure you got a good night's sleep.
That is such good advice, just in general. So I really like how you're kind of generalizing this to just use good communication techniques for tough conversations. This isn't even breakup exclusive stuff. But I do have one thing that I've heard. It's one of my pet peeves. You might have no emotional attachment to it, so maybe you can speak a little bit more objectively. Okay, cool. But I see situations where people, when they're breaking up, either as an attempt to make it feel easier for the person to receive, or as an avoiding having to really take ownership for like, I just don't want to do this anymore. There's this like blaming on God, like God told me I need to break up with you, or God wants me to end this relationship. Are you having feelings about it too? It's not just me.
Oh yeah, no, I totally am. And I have, unfortunately, I know, so I'm very much in the Catholic world. Most of my friends and family are Catholic. So I've had my fair share of Catholic breakup stories. And that's a terrible excuse. I'm just going to call it for what it is. That's a terrible excuse, Discernment is one thing. You discerned, hopefully through prayer, that you're not supposed to be with this person. That's a real thing. However, don't put all the blame on God. I think that's honestly just weird. It's kind of a strange cop-out. Just call it for what it is. You can say, I prayed about this, I discerned about this relationship isn't going any further. But don't come to it like you're doing this crazy holy act and God came and told you to do this, because that's just a little weird. You wouldn't do that with anything else either. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. And discernment is one thing, but putting that kind of label on it, I'm not a fan.
And it's so consistent with how we know that God moves, right? It's so very, 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 very not the norm that God sends an archangel to tell you exactly what to do, right? Like it happened in the Bible. So I do suppose it's possible. It's unlikely that it's happening to you. Like it is okay if you don't want to be in the relationship with him, and that's how God is letting you know that you don't want to be in this relationship anymore. Like you have a reason, right? Maybe you just don't like them. Maybe you're just there's like an element of them as a person that you don't enjoy. You don't enjoy the friendship anymore. You don't see a future with them because of X, Y, and Z. Like those are unpleasant things to say, but you are doing them and yourself and God a disservice by not just taking ownership over that, right? And I think too, it provides this opportunity for the other person to have this skewed relationship with God now, because if they feel like God is telling them to stay, and you're saying God is saying, no, this is horrible. I mean, that just doesn't really set the other person up for great success either in their spiritual life. Like it would be so much better to just have the courage to tell them what you're thinking. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore, or I just don't enjoy X about you, or whatever, I don't know. I just feel like it would be more compassionate to just tell the truth than to try to use that kind of cop out. I'm glad you agree.
That's another point that I wanted to bring up on the same note of this respect. Having respect for your ex includes being honest with them. Now, there's a very fine line between being honest with them and, giving them too much information. But I do think it's super important for you to be very clear with your ex why you're breaking up with them and being completely honest about it. Kind of on the reverse side of this, something I see a lot with Catholics, and I'm sure Christians, is when a couple, or when a boyfriend or girlfriend decides they want to break up, they really sugarcoat it because they don't want to say something and potentially offend or hurt their ex, which that's coming from a very good place, right? Like that's good. But when you sugarcoat it and you're breaking up, that can lead to a lot of confusion. It can very easily mislead someone, and it often leads to you causing more harm than good. Because if you're breaking up with someone and you're like, no, I love you, you're great, you're perfect, you're just this incredible person, everything about this relationship is perfect, but I'm breaking up with you. Like that's a very confusing thing. And if I were in a situation like that, I'd be like, okay, but then, why are you breaking up with me? If I'm so great and this relationship is so perfect, then why are you leaving? So I think part of being respectful to your ex includes being honest. And again, there's a fine line between being too honest, but you should share. It's as simple as saying like, I don't think our goals for our futures align exactly. You're not really the type of person that I'm looking for. I like you, but I'm just not feeling the chemistry. That sort of thing. You can be honest without being mean, and you can break up with someone kindly, but without sugarcoating it. And I think that's so important. And Catholics are guilty of this left and right. And it comes from a good place, but I am all for honesty and breakups because you kind of need that to actually end things.
Yes. And leaving the door open is honestly more cruel than just telling it like it is. A clean break,
100%.
while more painful in the moment, heals so much better.